So we're on the bottom of Samach Dalid Amid Beis. Itmar. Bottom line. Rav Huna Marav says, Halacha Kedivrei Chacham. Halacha is like the Chachamim that a Beicher, we had the whole back and forth in the Gemara about what was the timing of the Chachamim and Rabbi Akiva, and we concluded the Chachamim say Hamoicher sells a ba'ayin ra, and Rabbi Akiva says a moicher sells ba'ayin yaf. Hamoicher ba'ayin yaf. So Rav Huna Marav says the halacha is like the Chacham. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Amma says the same Shmuel. Halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. The hamoicher is ba'ayin yaf. Only Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Rav Huna. So the second man Amar, who said b'shem Shmuel, halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, said to Rav Huna, who said that halacha is like the Chachamim. V'azim and sagin amisa kamei de Rav, helchas Rabbi Akiva v'le'amal v'le'midi. He said, you Rav Huna, quoting from Rav, that the halacha is like the Chachamim, that hamoicher is ba'ayin ra. But many times, I said in front of Rav, you're quoting from Rav, and I said in front of Rav, the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, and he didn't object. Amalei, hechi tnisa. He said, how did you convey over this question? How did you convey the machlekes? Amalei, he said to him, Ipcha tanin. I said that Rabbi Akiva holds a moicher is ba'ayin raya moicher, and that the Chacham said a moicher is ba'ayin yafa moicher. So I said it over the opposite way around. That's the shita that he had. So he said, B'shem hachi le'amalach v'le'midi. He said that's why he didn't answer you, because you were saying the halacha is like the Chachamim, but you had the Chacham that's saying hamoicher is ba'ayin yafa moicher. That's why he paskined. He didn't object when you paskined like the Chachamim. But really, the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, like we have concluded that Rabbi Akiva holds ba'ayin yafa moicher. Amalei Ravina l'Ravashi, Lema azdu l'tamayu. Let's say this machlokes about who we paskin like, this machlokes between Rav and Shmuel, who we paskin like Rabbi Akiva, like Chacham, is the Rav and Shmuel shitase. The Amar of Nachman Amar Shmuel. Ha'ach and Shechok, two brothers who inherited an estate, and they divided up the property of the estate. The Gemara is understanding that when two brothers, Reuven and Shimon, divide up the estate, what essentially happening is Reuven is selling half of the property to Shimon in return for his half of the property, and vice versa. Shimon is selling the half that Reuven gets in return for the chelik that he's receiving. Each selling what they're giving in return for what they're getting. The half that they're getting is the merchandise, and what the other brother is getting is the payment. So
where are we?
We're about 8 lines down on Samachei Amaral. Right, so we're talking about the machlokes Rav and Shmuel. I should say go back. We had the machlokes on the previous block between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim in the Mishnah. We concluded the machlokes was when someone sells something, does he do so ba'ayin yafa? Rabbi Akiva says he's selling it ba'ayin yafa. It's to the benefit of the buyer, and the buyer gets a fuller. He gets the fullest amount that could be included. That would include, for example, if he sells a bar, that would include the path to the bar. But it would even more than that case, like we said in the previous Gemara. That was Rabbi Akiva's sheet. The Chacham say no. When someone sells, he only sells the minimal amount. So we had a machlokes. We just brought there was a machlokes that Rav paskins like the Chacham and Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Akiva. So now we're quoting the Azal Tamar, the Amar of Nachman Amar Shmuel. Now we're quoting Shmuel. Shmuel had said the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, that brothers who divide up the estate, Each brother, the one who receives the property, they don't have any. The other brother does not have a right to walk it through his share, and this would be like Rabbi Kiva says that a meicher is v'ayin yafa meicher. When Reuven sold to Shimon's half of the property, he sold it to him v'ayin yafa, including the path, and therefore there's no path. He doesn't retain a path for himself. Generally, a purchase is controlled by the seller. The seller decides what's included. The buyer is he's giving over something that's his, so he gets to decide. So we're saying the seller does so by ayin yafa, and he sells it to the other person. He sells it to his brother with all possible benefits. Each brother does not have a right to set up ladders. Let's say his one brother's property has a chutzner, and the other brother has a second story door. He can't set up a ladder to go through his door in his brother's property because he sold it to him with all rights. So if one brother bought they bought houses next to each other, and one brother wants to block the light of the other brother, you say you bought your property with all rights, and therefore you can't stop the brother from putting a wall there because he has all rights in the property that he bought. Because he doesn't have rights to have his irrigation ditch go through his brother. And Shmuel concluded these are halachas kavuas. It's not just a nice thing. This is something that you have to stick with. So you see that Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Kiva. Rav Amar yesh lahem, and Rav disagrees. Rav says they do have. Rav says ba'ayin roya. He paskins like the Chachamim, not like Rabbi Kiva. That ba'ayin ra is meicha, and therefore they have all these rights. When one brother sells the portion to his brother, he does so with the ayin ra, and he keeps for himself all of these rights. So Chayra, this is not that great that we have Rav and Shmuel having the machlokes, the halachas like Rabbi Kiva or like the Chacham by our Mishnah, and then we have a second machlokes where it's all dependent on the same thing. So why are they relitigating the same machlokes? If we said the halacha by this din of brothers that sold to one another by Hikam Rav, that's where Rav says that the halacha is like that. Maybe in that case we say that the person the brother gets a property, he gets it, and the other brother has no rights in it. Because his father also, he owned property, and nobody had any rights to put ladders or to put a irrigation ditch or to put paths. He owned it free and clear. So he wants to live exactly the same way his father lived on his half of the property. So that's why there's an extra reason over here to say that the sale was each person
buying raw.
Ayin ra, right? That he's not giving over any extra rights in it. Teda, and I'll prove I'll give you a raya that that's the case. The pasuk says it's not really a teda; it's more a pasuk that demonstrates this rule. I don't think we're bringing a raya from a pasuk in Tehillim, but it says that a person, the sons are take the place of the father. So a son who sells wants to retain for himself the full thing that his father. But in the case of our mission, in Stama case of machlokes of ayin ra, ayin yafa, where there is no paternal feelings of nostalgia that you want to have what your father had, maybe he's masking to Shmuel that ayin yafa meicha. Be it mabaha, and if it would be the other way around, if we just say the din over here in our Mishnah, and not the case of brothers, but Hakam Shmuel, maybe that's where Shmuel says the halacha is like give al b'ha'im a moedel Rav. Maybe he's moedel to Rav in the case of the brothers. Tzricha. That's why we have to say that the machlokes repeats itself, that Rav and Shmuel are consistent, both in the case of our Mishnah and the general of Moicha Bayin, Ro Bayin Yafa, and in the case of brothers. Amalei Rav Nachman Rav Huna, Hilchos and Kavasim, Hilchos and Kavasaychu. Rav Nachman and Rav Huna had said over b'shem Rav and Shmuel. They wanted to know who do we paskin like in the end. You, Rav Nachman, said over I forgot who was Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, the original one? I don't know. But the bottom line is that the halacha, Rav Huna had said, Rav Huna Marav said the halacha is like the Chachamim. Rav Nachman, Rav Yirmiyah Abba Shmuel, at some point we must have said, Rav Nachman said, oh, Dam Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, La'achat Shechoku. Right, so he was the one who said that we paskin ba'ayin. But which way do we paskin? Amalei, Hilchos HaKavasayf. Rav Huna said to Rav Nachman, we talk paskin like you, that ba'ayin yafamach. The mekravisu lebava, the reish galusa, the shchichi daini. He said to Rav Huna said to Rav Nachman, you Rav Nachman. It's a very interesting thing. Let's see the Rashbam, the Merkvisu Bei Reish Galusa, about a third of the way down in the wide lines. Rav Nachman Chasen de Beinesiah. Nachman was part of the family of the Reish Galusa. He used to be around the Dayanim, the Shchichi Daini. There were many Dayanim there. He saw how they paskin. So it's interesting that the decision is ultimately made about who the halacha is, not based on svaras, and not based on like who has it's not even based on who has a better Messiah. It's based on what the judges actually paskin. We assume that what everyone does, that's taka the halacha, that was something I found fascinating. I always assume when you have a discussion or an argument about who the halacha is like, they're arguing about, what did my Rebbe say? This is what my Rebbe said. I remember accurately. My Rebbe. This has nothing to do with it. We're saying it just based on what the Dayanim actually paskined, how they made the halacha. We see that there's shtaros that came out. We do it based on what the shtaros said. Yeah. Itmar. Mar says, Shnei bottom zelif nemizeh. You have two houses, one inside the other, meaning two people, let's say Reuven has apartments where like railway apartments, what they used to call. In order to get to the inner apartment, you had to go through the outer apartment. Shneim b'mecha, shneim b'matan. And Reuven sold both of them to Shimon and Levi. One he sold to Shimon and one he sold to Levi. Or shneim b'matana, one he gave to Shimon and one he gave to Levi. There's no rights for the one on the inside to go through the outside, or for the one on the outside to go through the inside. Obviously, the one on the inside is going to have to negotiate some kind of deal with the one on the outside in order to get in and out of his property. So the Gemara says, "V'chol shechein chitzain b'matana u'pnim b'mecha," and certainly this will be the case. If the one on the outside was given matana is more likely ba'ayin yafa. So the person, Reuven, when he gave it to the one on the outside, he gave him with all of its rights, including he didn't give away, he gave him including the right not to have people walking through it. And the inner one was b'mecha, which is a less generous type of bechlal in general, less likely to say ba'ayin yafa. A mecha is a sale, is a commercial deal. It's a business deal. So a person doesn't necessarily feel so well disposed to someone who he's selling something to as he does when he gives a gift. So in that case, certainly the one on the inside has no rights on the outside. What about the other way around, though? That's the harder question. When the one on the outside was given a mecha, so Reuven, who sold him, doesn't have particularly fond feelings. He's a business guy. He found someone to sell his property to. And Pnimi Matani gave the middle one, the inner one, as a matana, so he does want to benefit him. So maybe in that case, we'll be maskim that it's ba'ayin ra to the one on the outside. Over here, we really have it's ba'ayin ra. What's ayin ra to one is going to be ayin yafa to the other. Right? It's not a classic case of ayin ra, ayin yafa, where there's only one person. Right? Reuven is giving to two separate people. So if he gives the path to the one on the outside, that means he's taking away from the one on the outside. He's giving him ba'ayin ra. The one on the inside is benefiting, so he's giving him ba'ayin yafa. So the question is, how do you weigh those? So we're saying, certainly, if they both are the same, if they're both sales or both matan, so we understand that he's giving them both. He wants both of them to have the same rights, and both of them have neither of them could go into the other. But the question is, in this case, when the one on the outside is bemecher, and the one in the inside is matana, maybe in that case it would be enough of a reason to push that we would say we give an advantage to the one on the inside, that he gets an automatic right to go through the one on the outside. The Gemara wanted to say that the svara should be that no, we still stick to our guns. That since Reuven sold both of these properties at the same time, he made them both equal. That both of them have no rights to go through the other one.
Well, the question was not on the sale. Both were a sale. The question was, one was the mecher and one was the matana.
All right. I said that when he sold to both of them.
Yeah,
I meant to say that when he conveyed it to both of them, he conveyed to them both at the same time with the same restrictions or lack of rights to anyone else. They both got their thing without any easements going through it. That's what people want to say. Belohi, because it's not true. Mila, it's not. When do we say that when someone sells something, that when do we say a meicher is ba'ayin yafa? That everything, when you sell something, everything else is excluded. I'm sorry, but I mean it's not ba'ayin ra, ba'ayin yafa. That's that a person doesn't include things that are not part of the sale. That's only by a meicher. Aval b'noisa matana, noisin is kulin. But a person who gives a matana, he includes even these other things that are not necessarily in the deal. So we see that there is a tendency that matana is treated differently than a mecha, and therefore a person does tend to favor the matana. And therefore over here, let's say that since the person on the inside was given matana, he wanted to give him ba'ayin yafa, including the right to go through the one on the outside. So let's say the same thing in our case. That's what the Gemara's conclusion is. In that case, that we had a question of where the outside was with the sale and the inside was on a matana, that Einachanami, the one on the inside, does get a automatic right to go through the apartment on the outside. Zak the mission. Hamaycher is habayis, someone who sells a house. Macher is hadelas. He also sold the door that's in the house. Seems pretty simple, obvious to us, right? Avaloyes hamaftech, but not the key. Now, as we're going to see in the Gemara, these keys are not necessarily exactly the same as our keys. It's almost, I feel like the maftech is almost like a doorknob. Like they put it in, they use that to open and close. Because we're going to see some maftechas are sold and some are not. Now, if it's talking about the lock to the house, what's the use of having a lock without the key? So I think it's a slightly different type of key. Machar hamachteshes kavua. When he sold the house, he also sold the fixed mixing bowl. They used to have a mortar and pestle. They would pound their spices in the mortar. So if you had a mortar that was fixed in the ground, that is sold together with the house. But if it's a portable mixing bowl, a grinding bowl, then that is not sold. Machas esa it's strubel. If he sold the it's strubel, the Rashi explains, is a structure that was fixed in the ground that was used to hold a mill in place. And they would have two stones that they would turn one stone on top of the other to grind their grain. So they had a contraption, a structure to hold it in place. So that's also sold with the house. It's fixed in place. But not the thing that they would put the grain in that would distribute it into the mill, because that was not fixed in place. It wasn't attached. V'leis a tanner, not a tanner, v'leis a krayim, different types of ovens. These are like more like toaster ovens that can be picked up and moved. Essentially, all of these things, the nafkamina, the things that are sold are the things that are attached to the house, and the things that are not sold are the things that are movable, that are not attached. But if the seller said, I'm selling to you everything, and everything that's inside of it, then all these things that are not often moved, but are not attached to the ground, those are also included. Let's say our mission is not like Rameir. The Rameir, according to Rameir, Amar Machar is a keren, someone who sold a vineyard. Machar tashmishe keren. He also sold, if anyone's ever been in a vineyard, those are vines. So if you can't grow them on the ground. You have to put sticks for the vines to attach themselves to. So if he sold these a vineyard, it comes with the sticks. The sticks are not stuck to the ground, but they're needed. They're part of what's needed to grow grapes. So, according to Rameir, was saying something that is not attached is sold with the vine. Now, like our Mishnah, which we said listed a bunch of things, we said since they're not attached, they're not sold together with the house. So, no, you can even say Rameir. Hasam kaviyah. Over there, the sticks that are used to support the grapes, they're part of the vineyard. They're needed. No one ever takes them out. Kavua is different. Kavua doesn't mean the same thing, but in the Mishnah we're talking about that they're attached to the ground. This is kavua, means that it's designated to be used with this vineyard. No one's taking the sticks from one vineyard and moving it to another. That would be very rare. I'm sure it happens. It's possible to happen, but it doesn't happen. It's not likely. So therefore, it's part of this property. Practical Gemara about mafteach dum yededelos tani. Ba'delos tekfiyah mafteach tekfiyah. So Rashbam has a long explanation of this, but he said essentially what the Gemara is saying. We mentioned the mafteach, we mentioned the delos, but the way the Rashbam understands it, if you wanted to be machalak between something that's kavua and something that's not kavua, why'd you mention the delos at all? Why don't we talk about the two types of maftechas? It seems that there are maftechas that are always kept in the doorway, like I said, more like a doorknob used to open and close the door. And then there are maftechas that are taken away and then placed in later, which I guess have more of a lock function. So why did we talk about a delos? Why don't we just talk about those two dinim, of one that's kaviyah and one that's not? And that would tell us these two dinim. Vaistais, that the maftech over here must be one that is kaviyah. And even so, we're saying it's not sold. So l'chayra, this is shver. You're trying to say that Rameir holds that something that's kavua is sold, but in our mission it's talking about something that's not kavua. But the mafteach we've just proven must be also something that's not kavua. Must be also something that's kavua, because otherwise there was no need to mention a delos according to the Rashbam. Alamai, we must say, Rameir says his din, even our mission is talking about even something that is kavua, and Rameir says his din, Rameir says his din as well on something that is kavua. He says it's going to be sold with the property, and our Mishnah disagrees. Says even if it's kavua, as long as it's not attached, it's not sold. It's going to be that's not going to be sold with the property. Tan Rabban, a moicher is a bias. Someone who sells a house, machar sadelis. There's a brisa that says very similar to our Mishnah. They also sell the door, Bes Hanagar, the bolt. If you remember like these stories of the Wicked Witch, and not the Little Red Riding Hood. When a person would go into a door and they'd slam down that big piece of wood, the bar to hold the door in place. That's the naga. Bes haminol, and the minol is the lock. All these things are sold together. But not the key. Machar es hamachteshes chachakuka. When he sold the house, he sells the hollowed out machteshes is, like we said, the mortar that is used to grind spices in it. So if it was carved out, this is going to be the point that we're going to shtel on in the Gemara. If he had a piece of rock, let's say, that was in the ground, and he carved out a shape, a round shape in it, and used that as I'm sorry. Yeah, that's included in the if he carved out a mortar from a rock in the ground that was already in the ground, and he just made a mortar out of it. That's sold together with the house because that's part of the ground. Avalayas kavua, but not if he was a mortar that was kavua in the ground, meaning that he had first made himself a mortar from a piece of rock and then stuck it in the ground. Machar, it's strubel. That's what we said before. The thing that holds the mill to the ground, the rechaim in the ground. Avaloyas hakalas, not the thing that holds the tfua to put it into the mill. Loyas atanav, loyas kirayim, loyas rechaim. Not all these different types of portable appliances or utensils. Eliezer Omer, Eliezer says, Eliezer disagrees, and he says, no, anything that's attached to the ground is considered to be part of the ground. So even if he first made a mortar by carving it out of a rock and then stuck it in the ground, now it's stuck in the ground. So it's currently in the ground. And the Brisa continues like our Mishnah. It ends in the same way. Bisman she'amalei v'chol mashu b'seichai harikula mechurim bein kach kol mashu b'seichai harikula mechurim. If he said whatever's inside of it, then everything is sold. Ben kach u'ben kach. Whether or not he said kol mashu b'seichai, this is what we had said we quoted from the Mishnah before. All these discussions about whether these appliances, whether these things that are attached in the house those are sold, and we said if you make this all-inclusive clause saying whatever's inside of it, those are sold, that doesn't include these cisterns and these byris, and the Yitzia was the little structure that was attached to lean-to in the back of the house. Those are not included because those are different purposes. Those are commercial things. Those are separately used for. Those are not considered part of the house in the first place. That it's not a question of whether they're kavua. The question is if they're part of the house, and these are not considered part of the house. Even he says everything that's in the house, these are not in the house. That's the brisa. So we had a machlokes between the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer. The Chachamim say when you sell a mortar, it's only included in the house if it was part of the ground and then you made a mortar out of it. But if you made a mortar and then stuck it in the ground, that's not considered to be part of the house. It's not sold with the house. Rabbi Eliezer said it doesn't make a difference. Once you stick it in the ground, it's considered to be kavua. Tana Rabban, Sinur shechakku ulubsaif kavu. A gutter. So yeah, you had a let's say a log or a long rock that you made it first into a pipe, and then you stuck it into the ground. So you considered the rule is a mikveh is possible with mayim she'uvim. Mayim she'uvim is water that was in a kli. So if you take a pipe and you make it into a pipe, at that point the pipe can hold water. And then you stick it into the ground, you've taken a kli and you're putting the water that then comes from the rain and goes through this pipe, is considered to have gone through a kli, and it passes the mikvah. But if you do it the other way around, you take a big log, I shouldn't say log, because a log is wood and it's a whole different story. But you take a rock, a long stone, and you put it in the ground, and then afterwards you dig out the inside of it and make it into the shape of a pipe while it's already in the ground. It doesn't pass the mikvah. It never became a kli. While something is attached to the ground, it's a part of the ground, right? If you have a furrow in a rock that water passes through, we don't say that that's a kli. That's a natural part of the earth. So if you have a rock, even if you're the one who made the furrow in the rock, it's still part of the karka. It's not considered a separate kli, and the water that passes through it is not considered mayim shuvin to passel the mikvah. It's talking about money. This shita that we just said is not like the Rebbe Eliezer and the Rabbah. Hi, Rebbe Eliezer. Which Rebbe Eliezer are we saying? We're not talking about the Loy Rabbanim part. We're first saying which Rebbe Eliezer. We're saying it's not like Rebbe Eliezer. Which Rebbe Eliezer precludes saying like this? Rebbe Eliezer the bias. Maybe you'll say it's Rebbe Eliezer of the Bryce that we had just mentioned, that he said that whether you first dug out, whether you first dug out or carved out the machteshes and put it in the ground, or if you had the stone in the ground and you dug out the machteshes from the rock in the ground, in either case, it's going to be part of the karka. So maybe that Rebbe Eliezer who says that when he's saying this, he's saying that even if you first make it and then put it into the ground, it's still going to be considered part of the ground and sold together with the house. So you see, he holds that it's not a kli; it's part of the ground. Maybe the machlokes over there is not because of whether it's a kli or not. It's a question of what's sold when a person sells the house. It doesn't have anything to do with the technical question of whether it's a kli or not. It has to do with whether a person includes it. So if something was stuck into the ground, a person who sells wants to sell with everything that could potentially be included, and that's the reason why it was included. Okay, we're going to leave over Koveres Dvarim because that's a beehive, because that's a little more complicated case. Shkoyach.
Thank you. Have a great day. Good luck with your punch list.
Yeah, it's intimidating.
But it was. I never heard honeydew list. I heard punch list.